Hi, I'm Olivia Gude. I'm a professor at the University of Illinois at Chicago and the founding director of Spiral Workshop, which is an art program for teens. It's also a curriculum research project that invents new ways of doing art education. Really good curriculum isn't just delivering a preset content to the students, but it's actually art teachers being in collaboration with their students and coming up with new ideas, new knowledge, new ways of making. So I often think of art teachers as artist teachers, and part of their tools, along with the paint or the clay or the mosaic tiles or the film, are the students. And by that I mean that they work in the medium of students, that they're able to create dynamic collaboration. So the art teacher is a community artist who's there to convene important community cultural conversations. One of the things that I often say to teachers is that it's so important as we teach to hold on to why we wanted to be an art teacher to begin with. And sometimes there's this tendency to fall back on a very restrictive exercise because the idea is like, okay, I know this will work, I know what I'm teaching. What we want to do, though, is have these bigger cultural questions. And so for a new teacher, one of the things that's really great is to pay attention to the really great teachers around you and to borrow projects. No one invents art education from scratch. What we do is we borrow projects, we shape them, we change them, we make them work for us for the kinds of conversations that we want to do. Now, I've written this one article called Principles of Possibility. And the first principle is playing. And it's how do we get students to the point where they just want to jump in and make things happen, you know? And the thing is, that's hard. In an age of high stakes testing, in which students are always like, well, what am I supposed to do? What am I, what's the answer? It can be really difficult. And an art teacher has this crucial place in the school of helping students to believe in their own internal sense of worth, of possibility, of making knowledge. So I think that that's one of the things that you want to stay focused on in the beginning is how do we just relax and let go? So if a student is saying things like, is this finished, teacher? Or I don't know what to do, that's a curriculum problem. We have to figure out what kinds of art activities can we do that just help students to immerse themselves in that material, physical making. At Spiral Workshop, the first day of every class is a surrealist play day. And the reason we do that is that we've noticed that the students need that moment of just kind of understanding that there's not like a predetermined idea of what something has to be, just to kind of let themselves go into the creative process. And so, we've used this paranoia critical method, or we've used chants, or we've done stuff with poetry word games. But what you start to see is people realizing that they can kind of let go and just generate material. And then the students also realize that a lot of what you just let go and generate may not be very good, but that's okay, because then what happens is then you go through this process of editing and figuring out what directions are emerging and then how you follow that process. And it's such a pleasure to watch that year after year. And students who come to different Spiral theme groups, but oftentimes we use some of the same kind of surrealist exercises based on the real exercises that the actual surrealists did, the kind of gaming things they did. When students come, they're like, oh, great, I love to do that. I love that experience of kind of letting go. People have at different points sort of struggle with the definition of what is art. And most aesthetic philosophers now use what we call an ascriptive definition. And what that basically means is that art is something that is put forward by an artist or someone acting on behalf of the artist as a candidate for interpretation. So what does that mean? It means that I say, look, I made this thing. Now I want you to look at it, and I want you to think about this and all the different signifiers that are in it, and I want you to kind of put them into play and allow them then to have you make meaning in the world through the act of interacting with this object or event. So one of the things that I think is actually sort of amazing about art is it allows us to enter into kinds of pleasures, like ways of understanding the world, ways of noticing what's happening around us that really do enliven us, that make us more aware of everyday life. But the other thing I think that's amazing about art is that it always has a quality of specificity. It challenges any pre-established categories that you have. So it makes you always look at something new, look at something fresh. And so ultimately, you're in the situation of not knowing. Like, you don't know as many things as you think you do. You know, there's a very famous piece that Joseph Kosuth did called Chair, and it's got, whatever he makes a piece, it's a chair, it's a photograph of that chair, and it's a definition of chair, right? So then you're sort of caught in this idea of realizing that whenever you use language, it's always truncating your understanding of the world, because language itself can never be as complicated as reality. And so there's this way in which art constantly reminds us of that. It constantly brings us back to the specificity, to the complexity of this thing that can't just be simply categorized. And I think that that has a lot of implications, both for us, our ability to live accurately. And by accurately, I mean to really never stop being aware of sort of the unfolding of the world around us, and not think that we're just operating within sort of pre-established categories. Have you ever thought about what percentage of legislators send their kids to public schools?
It's very low.
Right. And so, you know, one of the reasons people say, well, give me the reasons, where's the research that shows why you should have higher education in schools? And here's what I say everybody I know who's rich sends their kids to schools that have lots of art. So if those rich people must know something, you know. So that's why, I really think that there's something to that. You know, we're always asked to over and over again explain why poor children or middle-class children should have the arts. But it's a given that any quality private school always has arts-rich experiences for students. And so why should we have to have this sort of data to prove that when we know that people who have resources want the arts for their children?